Welcome back to our Social Studies Unconference. I would like to take care of two housekeeping issues. First, I want to remind all of our today's attendees that we will be having the webinars recorded in full and will be available to you. And if you do need professional development credit for today, please be in touch. Megan will give you the details on how to make that happen. So I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Mark Ruppel, who is Senior Program Officer at the National Endowment for the Humanities, Division of Public Programs. He leads the digital projects for the public grants, which focuses on promoting humanities learning through digital technologies. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Tori, and thank you to Ed and everyone here. It means an awful lot to have this kind of gathering, and I'm going to share my screen in a second here, but I just want to say, hope you're all doing well out there on behalf of all of us here in DC. Stay safe, stay relatively sane. Again, thanks for your work. It makes our mission lived and real. So let me share very quickly what I'm going to talk about, and I don't want to take up too much time today. Let's see. Okay, Tori, are we good here? Do you see what I'm sharing? Hold on one second.
I'm not seeing you share.
Yep, give me 1 second here.
Okay.
Okay, how about now?
That's perfect.
All right. Well, anyways, I don't want to steal the thunder of a number of projects here today that are actually NEH funded projects, but I did want to give you a chance just to take a look at what we do with your taxpayer dollars in terms of supporting resources for social studies classrooms, humanities learning at large, and other engagements with things like literature, philosophy, jurisprudence, civics, all of the sort of stuff that's wrapped up into that incredibly unruly bundle that we call the humanities. Again, my name's Mark Ruppel. I do lead the digital projects for the public grant line and public programs here at the National Endowment for the Humanities. We fund a number of other efforts at the NEH, from preservation efforts with primary source material, papers, documents, artifacts, educational work that's developing curriculum and new approaches to humanities topics through our Division of Education. We fund more cutting edge, bleeding edge tools in our Office of Digital Humanities. And then in my division, public programs, we do focus on the more public facing side of this work. So that means we fund museum exhibits, historic site interpretations, podcasts, radio, films, such as the kind of stuff that you might associate with Ken Burns, or a film like Freedom Riders, which I think I noticed already is popping up in some of the chat boxes here as a great resource for teaching the civil rights movement. But my work particularly is in that digital context and in supporting games, VR, mobile apps, websites that are curated, really site-specific installations at museums and spaces like that. And I just wanted to share with you a couple of things today that we've been doing. But I do want to first seg into a question or a statement I think that all of us know here rather well, and it explains in some ways the reason why the endowment invests so heavily in these technologies. And that is, the humanities are messy. And it's something we all know is true because the humanities, history, literature don't always deal in absolutes, but rather ways of knowing. They might offer a potential answer to a query, but in the process, more questions are raised. They don't offer singular perspectives on an issue, event, or a figure, but rather multiple perspectives that educate, challenge, and inform our own points of view. This is obviously important stuff for learning contexts. Because of the need to embrace this messiness, good digital tools and resources in the humanities engage in what I call the 3 C's, and this is loose terminology here: context, causality, and contingency. In other words, they can provide students with background and supporting knowledge and the opportunity to interact with multiple perspectives, be it a well-known literary figure or a lesser-known participant in the civil rights movement. They can teach the ways that the pushes and pulls of historical places, events, figures, people, objects influenced each other. And they can do the one thing that I feel separates the humanities so deeply from STEM fields. They can provide learners, again, with that sense of contingency, those moments where our history, our understanding of it, teetered on a pinhead and could break in one direction or another. Except in digital practices, projects, and resources, we don't need to choose. We can explore both of those. Which brings me to digital projects for the public and some of our funded projects. This is the reason why the work I do at the Endowment is so eager to invest in digital tools and methods for learning in the humanities, simply because of the ways that it affords us different contexts for learning than other projects that we might fund more traditionally have. Let me run through a quick set of examples here of recently funded projects, some of which you may know, some of which you may not, some of which you're going to hear from today. They're all at different stages of development though, so not every one of these is available at the moment, but stay tuned, reach out to me if you'd like to know more. I'd really like to hear from you on a number of topics here. Including the possibility of discussing with some of you how these resources are actually found, because it's not necessarily a case of availability in most of these resources that we use, but really findability. And I'd love to hear about what you're learning with or struggling with on that side too. So I'll have my contact info at the end here, but let me jump in so as not to steal anyone else's thunder. Oops. All right, the first project that I just want to highlight is called Courtland 600, and this is really early in development, but it's a project in its early stages from the University of Connecticut that's pairing a team of experts on the Holocaust with a digital design lab to investigate the possibilities, challenges, difficulties of building an educational virtual reality experience on the trials at Nuremberg, Germany. And this is engaging with primary source materials, witness testimonies, and key moments of the trial. Resonant, exploring cultural heritage through game-based virtual reality, is another project that's working in VR to bring this kind of contextual, experiential, in situ learning to classrooms. And in this case, an organization called SciArc, which is a digital conservation organization, is working with indigenous experts, scholars, curators, digital conservation team, to design a VR experience on the Balcony House cliff dwellings in New Mexico that allows audiences to explore the site as well as access areas where the public isn't allowed. And again, importantly, they're working with tribal and local stakeholder communities in order to build the project around indigenous and scholarly interpretive perspectives, and they're building out a rather robust resource archive of educational materials and things that could really transition this to the classroom. People Not Property from Historic Hudson Valley, an interactive documentary that details stories of slavery in the colonial North. They are coming up next, so I'll say no more about that. Oops, excuse me here. There we go. I'll say no more about them simply because they can speak to their project far better than I can. But I will say it's been an incredible example of what's possible in this space and ways of interpreting and doing work and telling stories within the humanities that allow for both educational context to appear, but also really human stories to bubble up that make those contexts and those ways of learning far more engaging to both students as well as those who are really looking at this stuff in informal and extracurricular contexts. Reconstruction 360 from South Carolina Educational TV, a 360 video experience of the Reconstruction era South, a topic where and a subject where there is all too little content for educators at any level. And this gives you the opportunity to explore staged, but also in context aspects of the Reconstruction era South, learning through different figures and spaces that are in actuality real historic sites, the ways that the Reconstruction era really did shape and bend and distort, and also in some ways provide the foundation for an awful lot of what we dealt with and struggled with through the latter half of the 20th century. Since many of you were mentioning this in the chat box about the need for classics tools and opportunities, I threw this one in at the last minute. This is a project called Digital Giza that we funded a few years ago, and it is still in the process of just finishing its work. And it is a digital platform and a simulation of the entire Giza Plateau. And that means everything in the surrounding region, right down to the pyramids, all of the passageways through those pyramids that have been mapped through sonar technology. And what it offers is really unique here in that it allows students, players, those who are engaging with it, the opportunity to experience the plateau, one, as it existed during its time when it was built and in use, two, as it existed during the time that it was actually discovered and excavated, and it uses actual photographs and primary source material from them to tell that story. And then 3, present day context, where we can see the decay, we can see the crumbling, and we can see the ways that both human engagement with the site and as well as more research driven engagement has altered what's fundamentally there. Again, you can just search Digital Giza for that and you'll get the website, which will say it's still under progress and under construction, but the model itself is really accessible. Race to Ratify from iCivics is another NEH funded project. You'll hear more about this later on, but it's a great example of the way that in classroom participation and engagement with civics can be facilitated by a digital project or a game in this case. They can speak far more eloquently about it later on, but the numbers for this project are outstanding and really significant and show the clamoring, at least from my perspective, for this type of project. Low friction, but high engagement, and the kind of thing that I think many of you are using and working with at large. Mission US, who is also here today, is another NEH game that does indeed give you the opportunity to work through different episodes and different important moments in history. They are here as well. I'll let them speak to it, but it's again, another project we're quite proud of, given its reach and its impact and the ways that it's really, I think, set the bar for design in this space in terms of branching pathways, allowing for these contingencies to bubble up and this work to really carry over. And then finally, Walden, a game out of USC, which gives players a chance to virtually explore Henry David Thoreau's first year at Walden Pond. But this is the fullest type of literary experience, and based on our evaluation of the game's reach, it's used equally as much in social studies classrooms as it is in English. It's because the game also engages with the surrounding context of Thoreau's life, such as the Underground Railroad and the creeping encroachment of telegraph wires or the railroad, and ask the players to actually navigate balancing sustenance, artistic inspiration, and the larger historical pulls of Thoreau's time period. And I have to mention this too, that the game is free to all educators, as is everything up there that you just saw. In the case of Walden, this is a PS4 release, but it's also available for PC and Mac, and in the very near future, Chromebook. But all you have to do is go to waldengame.com/educators, fill out a quick request form, you'll get a download code, and you'll also be invited to share the ways that you've used this, either in classrooms or outside of it, which is an extraordinarily useful bit of feedback to the team as they move forward with their outreach. And I have to mention too, Edsitement, which many of you probably know too. NEH's one-stop shop for K-12 content and curriculum in the humanities. Here we offer free resources for teachers, students, parents, and it's high quality, vetted K-12 humanities educational materials in subjects such as social studies, literature and language arts, foreign languages, arts, culture. And again, there's a number of different ways that this is involved here. And it's really, really, I think in many ways, the most public face for the NEH as far as our educational work goes. All right, let me stop there. That's the end of what I have here. And I see Tori's jumping on here to likely pull the plug on my speech, but I would be happy, thrilled to answer any questions that you have. You can send me an email, and Tori, if we don't have time now, we can do this all offline. And I'm suspecting that's probably the best bet in this case. So
I think we have time for just 1 or 2 questions before we shift to the next group. Are there any questions from the participants? All right, hearing none, I'm going to thank Mark for sharing his wonderful work today. And I do want to give a shout out to Tracy Fullerton for her work on Walden. It's absolutely amazing. And as we are all in this time of shelter in place and social isolation, the lessons of Thoreau are very relevant today. So might be worth taking a look. And what a fabulous portfolio of projects you have, Mark. It's really quite impressive.
The benefits all out there for them. And I say this, and I'll say this one more time, Tori. The mission of the NEH is to support this kind of work in the humanities, but honestly, it's living through all of you here today. So we owe you a big round of applause, too, for everything that you're doing. So thank you.
Oh, the educators collected here today are just amazing. And we're delighted to have all the participants and the presenters. So with that, I'm going to transition us to